Since last March, there were nearly 3,800 reported incidents of hate toward Asian American and Pacific Islanders.
I think we got a lot more reports than the government would.
The incidents range from verbal harassment to physical assault.
They said, our respondents, that they didn't want necessarily individual redress. They wanted a voice to say, this is happening, and we want policies to stop it.
The deadliest attack happened on March 16th.
Some tragic news, the deadly shootings in Atlanta.
He had made the remark about, because of you, we're out of work.
Chin's death didn't make national news. The sentencing of his assailants did.
The charge, second-degree murder, plea bargain to manslaughter. The sentence, a $3,000 fine each, 3 years probation, no time in prison.
Is it because he is Chinese?
Is that what you think?
I think that's what it is. Discrimination.
War will also unleash a deep racial hate against all things Japanese. Most are American citizens by birth. There is no proven guilt, not even a proven military need.
Not even a proven military need.
With a wide range of racial atrocities committed from the long past to present day of the Asian American population, the discriminatory treatment they have faced is clearly evident. Ever since the late 19th century, the Asian population throughout the bulk of the Eastern Hemisphere has faced extreme racial and stereotypical treatment, most notable through the existence of the yellow peril, being seen as Asians unclean and unfit to live in America. Following this time, white nativists spread xenophobic propaganda about Chinese uncleanliness in San Francisco. This fueled the passage of the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act, the first law in the United States that barred immigration solely based on race. Initially, this act placed a 10-year moratorium on all Chinese migration. Proceed to the 20th century, and Asian officials in the Philippines, then a former colony of the U.S., shamed Filipinos for their supposedly unclean and uncivilized bodies. Colonial officers and doctors identified two enemies: Filipino insurgents against American rule and tropical diseases festering in native bodies. By pointing to Filipinos' political and mental unruliness, these officials justified continued U.S. colonial rule in the islands. With World War II in full swing, on February 19, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, incarcerating people under suspicion as enemies to inland internment camps. With this, we arrive at the Civil Rights Movement, a time more ideal than any before to fight against a century of continuous oppression. Yet with the Civil Rights Movement, many Asian American efforts have been shrouded by modern times. Such a prime example of this is shown throughout the existence of the Gidra magazine. In the April of 1969, the Sansei Japanese American students of UCLA launched the first issue of Gidra, the monthly of Asian American experience, the unofficial inaugural newspaper of the Asian American movement, in conjunction with the university's Department of Asian American Studies. From 1968 to 1974, Gidra remained active on the university's campus, and then in the Crenshaw neighborhood of Los Angeles. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the Japanese were thrown into internment camps from 1942 to 1945 and alienated from American society. However, the organization of the Third World Liberation Front protests in 1968 at San Francisco State University, the establishment of the Asian American Political Alliance the same year at UC Berkeley, and the formation of Yellow Power in the late 1970s, ushered in an Asian American movement combating racist stereotypes and establishing unity within Asian America, of which Gidra was the pioneer magazine. Staff members Jeff Furuomura described Gidra's purpose as all part of the building self-reliance, and that in the process, creating all of our alternatives. Gidra provided the platform of an alternative press which Sansei Japanese could generate ethnic pride by utilizing the uncensored format of an alternative press to promote the radical Yellow Power publicizing the Sansei recounts of Nisei internment, refuting traditional Japanese cultural values of silence and modesty while promoting Asian American political organizations and ethnic celebrations. With 66 full-length issues before its closing, Gidra has numerous articles which could all attribute to its effectiveness in the civil rights movement from the Asian American activist perspective. However, I will be focusing on Gidra's format as an uncensored magazine and its usage of art, storytelling, and poetry to convey such messages. Having unsurprisingly been rejected support from the UCLA administration in 1969, a few Asian American students still eager to run such an activist form of media pooled their $100 contributions together for their ability to start the production of Gidra. Owning the full rights over it now, Gidra and its writers were granted the power of uncensored media formatting, allowing for a fresh take on a magazine turning strongly artistic and unique. Through this, Gidra soon served as the new press for the politically radical Yellow Power, a popular ideology that later encouraged the Sensei's radicalization of the Japanese American image. One of its earliest and most well-known parts of Gidra's radicalization of the Asian American voice would be printed on the very first issue, that being the introduction of their concept of Yellow Power. Elaborating upon this, its writer, the UCLA student Larry Labuda, wrote the article Yellow Power, appearing in its very first issue. It raised extreme controversy, yet brought relevance to the racism the Asian American community has faced continuously. In the article Yellow Power, Labuda stated that this article was a call for Asian Americans to end the silence, condemning each other to suffer in this racist society. Realizing this, the Asian American community, through Yellow Power, rejecting our past and present condition of powerlessness, should be realized. Playing off of this momentum of the Yellow Power movement, numerous articles followed the original's footsteps, with Amy Uematsu's article, The Emergence of Yellow Power, being one of the most successful, first created within Gidra, and later finding its way into the Los Angeles Free Press. Once in there, it was given the new title of Yellow Power Arrives. Its inclusion within this led it to become one of the most influential pieces of activist-related Asian American media. With this uncensored format, the writers of Gidra were capable of circulating the irreverent tone used by many Yellow Power-focused writers amongst the rising Sansei population around California, allowing the incitement of self-advocacy amongst the Asian American population. Gidra's usage of poetry and art as a crucial tool for the suppressed Asian voice further served to encourage the expression of a Sensei population which was not only repressed but oftentimes angry. Like many other forms of written medias, Gidra would host continuous comics of sorts, but they wouldn't be so stale and comical per se as others. Its contents would rather focus at conveying rich examples of gross racial stereotyping across the nation, be it Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, or others. On the other front, being very notable within each Gidra issue, was the People's page, a place serving as a blank canvas for readers to submit all forms of stories, poetry, and art. With this, it both allowed and encouraged the outward expression of people's pent-up grief, rage, or heartbreak. With this angle, Gidra delivered radical social commentary alongside criticism through different means of art in a sincere, truthful, and irrelevant fashion. An example of this could be Harumi's poem, My Sad Yellow People, where she stated, "How sad my family, we should be, to be so short in thinking, young men dying, just to free, just to give us life, just to prove, I love you, you are mine." Through this allowance of Japanese American cultural identities, To seep through the medium of poetry, art, and storytelling, Gidra was able to craft a genuine feeling of a Bashu, being part of a community and feeling sheltered during the process of internment. In short, acknowledging the unique format of Gidra as an unrefined, deeply political magazine, allowing the publication of politically controversial and fresh statements are critical in understanding Sansei activism to its core. Alongside this, one cannot forget the presence and controversial impact of Gidra's slanty-eyed caterpillar icon. Drawing heavily upon past derogatory Asian stereotypes in other sorts of media, this is a clear example of Gidra not afraid to reclaim such stereotypes and utilize them for greater purpose and resolve. Through the informal artistic style, Gidra was in the end successful in creating an environment in which radical and suppressed Asian American emotions regarding their experiences could be effectively expressed and retained.